The state of the world's economies continues to concern investors. One analyst from RMB Morgan Stanley described the recovery as triple B, bumpy, brittle and below par. Here to reassure us that the world is in a happier place than it was 4 years ago is Director of Investec Asset Management, Jeremy Gardner. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
Just in terms of this, and you talked about this in your presentation, South Africans become very pessimistic at certain points and they think that the whole world's against them. What's your perspective as you've been traveling around the world in terms of where South Africa is as an economy and a country at the moment?
Well, I get a fairly interesting perspective because I've just spent the last week going around South Africa doing presentations on where things are at the moment, and I get this overwhelming feeling that we're at another of those points that South Africans get to where they just want to give up, where they feel that we're the only country that has problems, and where can they go to? And I think that I have the luxury of spending about a week a month in London, in Europe, and as a result you get to see what is going on out there. And I think because we're isolated as individuals, we don't really know what is going on in the rest of the world. We don't meet people that live in Greece, that live in Spain, that live in Italy, and we don't speak to them about what they're going through. Because if you did, and you become very aware of it in a place like London, if we did, we would realize that we do have problems, absolutely. But a lot of the problems that we've got are happening across the world as well. I mean, we're not the only country that got downgraded. Everybody's been downgraded. We're not the only country whose currency is weakened. We're not the only country where people are striking for more money. You know, last weekend there were 56 strikes across Spain in 56 cities, massive strikes, tens of thousands of people, same in Athens, burning cars. It's tough out there. You know, we do have problems specific to South Africa, and we need to sort those problems out. We need to start making decisions. We need to put the right people in the right jobs, because actually we can fix this country quite quickly.
Let's just take, before we talk about South Africa, a little hop, skip and jump around the world and some of the big issues that have been driving markets in those regions. The first one is obviously the big engine of the world economy and the US. We've seen the two presidential candidates sparring, particularly about how they'd confront the debt problem in the States. What's your perspective on what's going to happen post the election, whether it be Obama or Romney, in terms of coming to grips? Can they find the partisanship, put aside the partisanship rather, and find a solution to this ever-growing debt problem?
Well, they're going to have to start reducing the debt. Mr. Obama's put on an extra $6 trillion. Bush before him put on $4 trillion. So together they've put on $10 trillion onto what is now over $16 trillion of debt. Their debt to GDP 103%, rising 1.5% per month. And they've got to start cutting. Fortunately for them, or unfortunately, it appears that there was a survey done recently that said that 70% of Americans believe that cutting the deficit and the debt is their #1 priority, and that they're happy to raise taxes and slash spending. Although the article then went on to say that this is only theoretically so, because when asked about specific policies that would have to go, they didn't like that at all and actually favored raising spending. The only project that there was general agreement that they'd be happy to cut was aid to the world's needy. So they're going to have to start cutting back on debt at some stage. Mr. Romney said in his recent interview that if Mr. Obama gets in, he's going to take debt up to $20 trillion. They can't keep doing that. So they're going to have to start cutting back, probably happen after elections. Be interesting to see what they do about the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff is coming 1 January 2013. Between $600 billion and $1.2 trillion is going to get sucked out of the American economy in the form of demand. It's going to be higher taxes, and it's going to be less spending by government, and that could knock the American economy between 2% and 4% from a GDP perspective. So if that happens, and it's going to happen on the 1st of January if nothing's done about it, you're going to see them go back into recession. But we suspect that there will be some scrambling straight after elections to try and limit those tax increases or the spending cuts, in order so that the impact is not too serious.
Okay. Now, there has been some positive signs from the American economy. We've seen the unemployment rate drop below 8% for the first time in 4 years. You also alluded to what corporates intend doing in terms of employment going forward. What's your perspective on actually really getting down the unemployment from 8% to 6% from the corporate American side of things?
Look, America's starting to feel better. You're starting to see evidence of recovery coming through, particularly in the housing market, which is very important because most of their recovery starts with the housing market first. If the housing market is not recovering, it's very difficult for the rest of the economy to recover. Interviews done with the leading corporates, I think about 17% of them said that they would be hiring over the next year. 70% of them said they would do nothing, and the remainder said that they would cut. So that's an enormous improvement on 2-3 years ago, when if you'd asked the same question to corporates, they all said that they would have been cutting their workforce quite significantly. Unemployment below 8% for the first time, as you say, in 43 months. There are various anomalies as to why it dropped below 8%, but still, it's nice to see it below 8%, and let's hope it can stay there. So all in all, things looking better. QE3 will help underpin the economy a bit. Mr. Bernanke under fire from Mr. Romney. Mr. Romney accusing him of effectively backing Mr. Obama, which he has to an extent done, because QE3 will underpin the stock market, will underpin the economy, and generally when the stock market and the economy feels good during elections, the incumbent tends to win.
So is it your opinion that Mr. Obama is likely to remain the president of the US?
Not at all. I can't have an opinion on that. Unfortunately, it's neck and neck. It's going to get very close. We've got another debate on Monday night, I think it is. It's going to be very close. Either way, whoever comes in is going to have to start putting in some programs to start bringing down the debt at some stage.
Now, just turning our attention to Europe for a little while, and obviously we've seen this sort of ping pong going on between Spain taking a bailout from the EFSF. It looks like they're going to do that now. Why does the market treat that as a positive in the current environment?
Well, I think the market's worried that someone like Spain may fall over. I mean, you saw they took 100 billion euros bank bailout not so long ago. I mean, they needed to do that because their banks are about to fall over. Why were their banks falling over? Because everyone was pulling money out of the banks. So they injected 100 billion euros into the banking system. But that doesn't really help if in July alone 74 billion euros got withdrawn by people. 300 and something billion euros have been withdrawn over the last year out of Spanish banks. It's very difficult to try and keep your banking system afloat when you've got a lack of confidence that is just seeing people pulling money out. So they got the bank bailout, and now comes the country bailout. It's been approved already, and they've been waiting to give it to them, but the Spanish have needed to ask. And they haven't been asking because it comes with a whole lot of conditions, and those conditions are austerity linked. So they're going to have to bring in a number of tax rises, a number of salary cuts, etc., which are deeply unpopular already, as I said. People rioting across the whole of Spain at the moment. But the markets liked it because it should stabilize Spain a bit, and it means that Spain are agreeing with the austerity measures that are necessary as well. So all in all, from an economic perspective, it's a good idea. Whether or not they can implement it on the ground remains to be seen, because what you're seeing in places like Greece, places like Spain, is that the people are saying that they don't like this austerity. They believe that these bailouts are not designed to save them. They're designed to save Spanish banks in order to protect German, British and French banks.
Right, okay. Quite a different story is what's going on in China, and the world's second biggest economy now, sitting on a massive amount, the complete opposite of where you could say the US and Europe are at this point. What do you expect from the Chinese economy in terms of the argument about a soft landing or a hard landing?
There was a lot of talk at the beginning of this year that the Chinese growth for this year, 2012, could be as low as 3 or 4%. Now, that would be a disaster for the global economy. 6% would be a hard landing, 3 or 4% would be a crash landing. And if the Chinese economy crash landed, the global economy would go with it. Most of the commentators seem to see, so far it's grown, I think it was just over 8% for the first quarter, 7.6% around there for the second quarter. It'll probably grow between 7 and 7.5% for the third and fourth quarter. Most of the commentators, S&P, still say that there's a lot of powder left in their stimulus keg, which is good. They see them growing, most commentators see them growing between 8 and 8.5% next year. So that looks good. they definitely do have issues. They've got financial issues. There are some bubbles in their financial sector. They've got construction issues as well. No doubt some bubbles there too. But when you've got $3 trillion of reserves, you can soothe a lot of pain. They've got elections coming in November. You'll probably see them come with some stimulus. They normally wait till the new government comes in, and then the new government announces a stimulus, gets the economy going, and the new government is then popular with the people. But certainly none of the fears that there were in the beginning of the year that got markets quite jumpy about a complete Chinese hard landing.
So what we're seeing is, tough times still for the likes of Europe, signs of hope for the US. China's obviously got a massive amount of money they can spend on stimulating their own economy. Where does this leave South Africa in the context of things?
Well, South Africa has come reasonably well through this crisis. We're still growing. Germany even is only going to grow at about 1% this year. Britain's in recession. Europe's in recession. They're going to grow they're not going to grow. They're going to shrink minus 0.8% this year, probably flat next year. America's stumbling along from a growth perspective. We're going to grow about 2.5% this year, up 3% next year. So we're okay. Obviously, our exports to Europe have dropped. Europe used to be our biggest trading partner. That's dropped from about 34, 35% down to, I think, 26, 27%. But that has been replaced by trade into Africa. Africa has now gone up from about 27% to 34%. China remains our biggest trading partner. So we're okay. We're working through it. But we've got to make sure that we sort out our issues now. We can't afford another downgrade. I think if there is a silver lining to come from what has happened in South Africa over the last month, I think it is that hopefully people, politicians, etc., will realize the impact of what they say. Foreign investors listen to what we say. Foreign investors write it down. Their newspapers cover it. And Pravin Gordhan for a long time has been pleading to people to please be careful what they say, to debate responsibly. Jill Marcus also doing a fantastic job like that. And I think we just have to be aware of our image to foreign investors, because we've had the downgrade, one or two more of those, and we go to what is known as junk. It doesn't mean it's worth nothing. It just means that you become speculative grade rather than investments, which means pension funds, insurance companies, unit trusts can no longer invest in your bonds, and that becomes a big problem.